Okay, so if we were to look at the freeze response, now the freeze response is really common for women, and like the disassociation, the detachment. So when the hyperactivity, or when your body goes into fight or flight and it becomes too overwhelming and your nervous system senses that you may not survive, the freeze response kicks in. And the freeze response slows everything down into hypoactivation, or like disassociation, numbing out. You've probably felt before. So the freeze response is really common amongst women because when prey freezes, it can survive because a predator might assume you're already dead, right? So if a saber-toothed tiger sees you on the floor frozen, they're going to be like, oh, you're already dead. Actually, no, that's still at you, but you know what I mean, right? So, so if you are in a traumatic situation and you freeze, one, you don't also feel the pain of it, which is really important. So even if that saber-toothed tiger came up and did attack you, you wouldn't feel the pain because you numbed out and dissociated. So for a lot of women that have been raped, they will numb out and disassociate because they know that they can't fight back. They know they're not strong enough to fight back. So they're going to disassociate and freeze and numb out so they don't have to feel the extent of the pain. There's also another kind of second component of the trauma response, which is the tend and befriend, that often happens amongst women. The tend and befriend means that, if I do something to make you like me, you may not kill me. So that can also happen as a trauma response, but less of that fight or flight. Like if a saber-toothed tiger was running towards you in the wild, you wouldn't be like, oh, let me make friends with a saber-toothed tiger. But if a different tribe was coming towards you and you were to make friends with them, then they might not kill you. So how that shows up in modern life is that we will people please so that we aren't put in danger. And we don't necessarily think the danger is to be killed, but we don't want the danger of rejection. There's still that stress response of the fear of rejection. So we go into tend and befriend as the trauma response instead of, say, fight or flight. We can also have the trauma response as that kind of second response, like I was just saying before I mentioned, where after we have a freeze response or after we have a fight or flight, we then phone up our friends to get tended and befriended by our friends so that we feel safe again. We feel loved, we feel accepted, etc. Right? So that detached response is basically to allow you to not feel the extent of the pain, to really drop out of your body and have that out of body experience with trauma. So that shows up a lot for sexual trauma in women. It can show up a lot for any kind of physical violence at home as well. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that feeling of numbing out from a situation. Sometimes you can even just numb out at like a stressful time during work, and you just numb out because you don't want to be feeling the pain that you are feeling and you don't know how to get out of the pain. So the way in which you get out of the pain is by numbing out. Now, key thing, emotional numbness or disassociation is a learned behavior. So it's a survival strategy from our early years or from even later in trauma in our life, right? And this numbness is often portrayed as a masculine virtue. It's like a badge of toughness, or it can come up as humor, right? It can come up as many different ways. For men, the way that the emotional numbness comes out is that masculine virtue. For women, it can come out in the same way. We wear that masculine armor as some kind of badge of honor, or we wear our strength and the fact that we don't cry as a badge of honor, a badge of toughness. For some people, what happens is their emotional numbness is they joke. They joke as a way to cope through, or they're overly positive as a way to cope with their trauma and with their emotional numbness, right? So if someone is showing no feelings, if someone is joking all the time about serious things, if they're always having this masculine virtue, this badge of, wearing this armor around them, they're always tough, I never cry, etc. Generally speaking, that person is suffering because they don't even know most of the time because they're not able to be honest with themselves. And so why this education is really important and why I want to do this episode was because for a lot of us, we don't even know. We don't know what we don't know. There's probably some of you that are listening to this episode and being like, holy shit, I had no idea that I was holding this, but because I now have learned this makes sense. Like this is actually what's happening. So for some men, some women, they don't even know they're in pain because they've lived for it for so long and they've normalized it. So many of us normalize our pain. We normalize our suffering. We normalize all of those things that we really don't need to be normalizing.